month. I know we've been kind of quiet on YouTube only, for the last few months. I've been basically just enjoying the car, driving it around, driving back and forth to work, doing this shit. Just manual gear pulls, manual and automatic, just having fun, driving around town, doing pulls. But we've been struggling with this car to get it to launch. It will not go into launch control whatsoever. And I don't know why. It also won't clutch adapt. For those of you guys that are unaware of the RS3 or the automatic German cars, we do, and we posted up a video back in the day when I first bought this RS3, clutch adaptions. It compacts, aligns, calibrates the clutch back to get it to work properly. Now mind, take that with a grain of salt because I don't actually have the technical definition of what the clutch adaptation does. Essentially, the car won't do that. And as you guys know, one of the main goals of VR6 swapping this RS3 is going drag racing, having fun at the quarter mile, at the half mile, launching. Even in the street, launching, just having fun. So while I have been enjoying this car this entire time, the journey's been absolutely phenomenal. What Stav's been able to learn and do with the car, and me, and with the welding, and again, we're still noobs, but we're doing more than what we did years ago, and that it's miles ahead of what we used to touch, you know? So I used to rely on unreliable shops and have to deal with their excuses or parts went missing. Shit, we also discovered, if you guys remember in the beginning of the swap, that I don't even have my original transmission in this car. The transmission that I have in this car has a different mileage than the rest of the chassis, like 15,000 difference. So now being in control of what we do to this car, we've learned so much and gotten involved with so much. That being said, right, to go back to the transmission issues, we were leaking fluid. I briefly mentioned it on the dyno. She sputtered out a little bit of fluid, and I didn't know if it was from the rear main seal, which we discovered it wasn't. The transmission is actually leaking from the back housing of the clutch cover, and we really couldn't figure out why. It was going to be the second time we would replace this clutch cover. If you guys remember, I posted a screenshot, and I'm like, why? We replaced OEM, everything's OEM, we've done everything right. And then I realized, you know, we really haven't. I didn't use the clutch insulation toolkit. I didn't check for clearancing on the transmission when I just shoehorned it in there. I made some fake, like, my own tools at home, and I didn't check for none of that. Didn't use a dial mic. And I was just so in a rush to get things done and get the car driving. I was so excited. I was like, it'll be fine. I'll just put it in there. It didn't matter. And what I also missed was an input shaft bearing. And I'll show you guys a picture that gets installed in the back of the crank for this DSG, DQ500, even DQ250 cars. Again, didn't even think of it. We've learned so much in the last 3 or 4 months. And again, you know, one of Stav's friends, Billy from A to B, and then we have RCP Racing, you know, Racing Custom Parts. He reached out, Conrad, and he said the same thing. So when Billy told Stav, hey man, are you running an input shaft bearing on the back of that crank? Stav's like, well, I don't know. I didn't put the car together. Let me talk to George. So Stav reaches out to me. I'm like, the input shaft bearing? What are you talking about? It's an automatic. It doesn't need it. And he goes, yeah, I think the 5-cylinder has it. I go, shit. Then Conrad said the same shit, and I go, you know what? Let me take a look at the like pictures when I first yanked the 5-cylinder, and we were just taking pictures of shit to get rid of it. And sure enough, the crank on the 5-cylinder car for the DQ500 had an input shaft bearing, a little $7 bearing. And what that does is it keeps the input shaft from traveling up and down. And for those of you guys that don't know, I'll put up another picture. There's not really an input shaft, so to speak. The clutch pack has an input shaft snub on it. So it's not like an old school manual car that has a shaft that runs through the transmission. So that thing is heavy and front heavy, and it's ridiculous. So I feel stupid. I mean, but listen, I hope you guys are learning from our mistakes. Again, it's that input shaft on the clutch. If it's not kept and supported from the front and sways, there's a seal around the clutch cover that will get blown out, especially under load, even just normal driving. And there's fluid that bounces around behind the clutch cover. So it only makes sense that I'd say that now we know why the clutch has been leaking. It's been seeping from that input shaft seal because that transmission is moving up and down. It's blowing out that seal because there's no input shaft bearing. And also, it won't adapt in the transmission via VACCOM or Otis because it's not aligned. And we're unable to maintain fluid too because it just keeps leaking. So listen, I didn't want to take the car apart right away. We just got done with the dyno in December. I've essentially just been driving the car to work, having fun in the street, enjoying the car, taking more data, but we haven't really been able to progress forward. In fact, you know, I'll say this, we also were held back on the dyno, because during clutch shifting, or even on the higher output, we saw a little bit of clutch slip. You know, mainly we were held back for fueling, and I was kind of being a pussy about it too. You know, 85% injector duty cycle. I was like, let's just kind of back off a little bit. You know, we made 1138 wheel, we're good. I think I kind of held us back. I think we probably could have made 1250, 1300 easy, I think. But I was scared, man. A lot of eyes on this. I just wanted to make decent power. Anything over 1,000 I would have been happy with, but to make 1265, just under 1300 horsepower and 1138 wheel horsepower, I mean, we were happy. But now the buck stops here, right? So now we want to launch the car, go drag racing, but we're unable to. So wanted to do this quick drive with you, because I'm sure there's going to be people on the internet that are going to say this car's not running, we blew the engine, and you know, we're only taking it apart because the engine's, I mean, I can't be happier. The DP engine race parts, the pistons and rods have taken all the abuse we've thrown at it. Everything's worked so well. The coolant temps are under control. We got that CSF radiator that we installed. Again, not a sponsor. We just straight up bought a B5S4 radiator and fucking retrofitted into this RS3. And the coolant temps are 1 bar under the center. That's how cool it can, with one fan too, one puller fan. Amazing. It just works so well. And this is what I've been doing. Again, just doing pulls, enjoying the car. I got the laptop mount pointed here now, and this, just getting it going. And I'm trying to like foresee the pulls. I try to like pull my neck back to hold in place, but the car is just so violent, and I just can't wait to launch this fucker and get it going. And that's the truth. So guys, listen. Without making this a 20-minute intro, I'm gonna get the car back to the house. I need to pull the transmission. I need to be able to install that input shaft bearing. I also bought an official clutch kit, which I'll show you here as soon as we get to the garage. It's the real deal fucking clutch installation toolkit. So we're gonna check for clearance in. We're gonna do a video on the installation of a clutch. I also, completely forgot this. I sent out my OG bell housing. You know what? Let me not talk about it too much. Let's just talk about it as soon as we get to the garage, and I'll show you what we did. And I'm sure you guys can tell. So as you can see, the center of this wood is really dark, and you can kind of see the circle before I started laying wood of just the fluid that leaks after just driving. So sometimes it's small, sometimes it's larger. All depends on how bad I kind of beat on the car and stretch out that input shaft seal. But that's basically the issue. And also, we have Stav's shitbox inside the garage, which I'm sure he'll make a video about. We ended up pulling his 12 valve, pulled my old TDI transmission, carbon clutch that was on there, got rid of the carbon clutch. But I still have my manual transmission for my B5, and then he has his RS6 ZF transmission from one new RS6 that ended up having some issues, and I think the guy wrecked it. So we were able to pick up this transmission, and we're going to shoehorn it into Stav's B5. But I'm going to let Stav make a video about that, but that's going to be really exciting since now we're getting a little bit more comfortable with fabricating and wiring. Really excited to see Stav kind of pull that bad boy together. But again, RS3 wise, just been enjoying driving, having fun with it, doing pulls, dealing with a fluid leak. But it's time to get this transmission fixed, get this girl launching. Yeah, let's do that. All right, so clutch installation toolkit. I told you I picked one up. So one ended up coming in. This will allow me to clearance, measure, check, make sure it's properly installed, as opposed to just shoehorning it in that I did last time. So yeah, clutch installation toolkit, really happy about that. You can get them anywhere between 500 to about 700 euros. So if you can't get them for any cheaper, snag one. If you have a RS3, TTRS, if you do your own work. A lot of shops don't even use this tool. So when we used to have a lot of issues with our RS3, the shop that we dealt with didn't even use an installation toolkit. They just kind of shoehorned it in too. So huge learning curve. Again, now that we're doing all the work on my RS3, we fucking engine swap this thing. It's probably smart to pick one up. So lesson learned there. We're going to be doing a separate video on the clutch installation there. Also, we talked about clutch cover seal. So this is the clutch cover that goes over the actual clutch, right? Goes over the top, and it seals around this outer ring kit pretty much. And this seal, because there's no input shaft bearing, which, you know what, let me just show you. We actually installed one on my 2.8 VR6 that we took apart a couple weeks ago when we sold the car. So that bearing is not installed on my RS3, on the VR6 crank. I didn't know it needed one. On the RS3, it has one. Again, the same picture I showed you guys before. We ended up buying like 7 and then tested installing one, and it fits in the VR6 crank, no problem. And just to show you about input shafts we talked about. So here's your input shaft. Is basically part of the actual clutch cover itself, and that part is going to ride on that bearing. So if it's not supported, that part will just drift up and down a large margin. So it's meant to just go in there and sit. Don't mind this. This is a custom tool that I made with a socket on an old clutch cover, but this is essentially how it will go through the flywheel and then inside the input shaft bearing and then sit there to stay supported. So we think that's also part of the issue why the clutches won't adapt, is because that bearing, number one, is not installed, and hopefully I didn't do any damage to the inside of that DQ500 with all the pulls, the dyno, and all the dumb shit that we've been doing with the car since we left the dyno too. So yeah. Oh, let's talk about bell housing. All right, I sent out my OG. This is the original RS3 2018 DQ500 front bell housing that I removed. Right, and I just kind of kept it in this box because I had purchased another bell housing from a friend of mine over in Canada, Sam, who had one machined a long time ago. But surprise to me, you cannot interchange these without properly shimming and aligning them. So a few months ago, Conrad from RCP reached out, said, hey man, here's a couple of culprits that could be part of your leak. Also, are you using the OG bell housing? And this was back in like November of last year. So again, we sent out the OG bell housing a couple months ago, had it machined. RCP, Racing Custom Parts, ended up adding their billet adapter to the actual housing, kind of installed in. And this is my original bell housing that we're going to be reinstalling. Now that we're going to pull the transmission and fix both the input shaft bearing, we'll install in the back of the crank on the RS3, and then the new clutch cover. And then what else? And then us, obviously, removing and properly installing the clutch kit. We bought the shim kit, so we'll be able to measure, verify which shims have to be installed. So we'll finally do this proper and then be able to adapt the clutch, go launching, and kind of seeing what the car can do in the quarter mile with all the power we've made. All right, so the transmission is out. We popped the clutches out. Now I'm taking a look at the discs. I'm actually kind of surprised that none of the discs are actually torn up, or the friction plates. Some of them got some lines embedded into them, but nothing you can catch with your finger. So just kind of like some surface changes. Is just like maybe some little polishing changes here on the scratches, but they're not even, you can't even catch it with your finger. So I think just because we haven't launched on this car yet, we just went to the dyno, we did a shit ton of pulls on the car just for fun on the street, but not really any major launching that's going to put crazy amount of load here. I know a lot of people consider over 1,000 horsepower a good amount of load on a car, but I think for this clutch pack, the HD 1400 kit, I think we're pretty good. I'm going to send these pictures of the discs and the friction plates out of the clutch over to Dima, and if he needs me to ship them to him and he thinks we should replace everything, we'll replace it. If not, I think we're okay. So that means now, as is, we should be good to pop off the bell housing here and then install this bell housing, the original bell housing that was attached to this transmission. And then I got the motor out. So then just kind of have it sitting here. We'll install that small bushing, the little pilot bearing on the inside of the crank. And other than that, this is pretty much ready to go. And then we'll get this transmission ready here in the next couple of days. Tomorrow is going to be part 1, Monday. And then Wednesday morning will be part 2, swapping out the bell housings on the transmission. And then part 3 will be installing some of the upgraded assemblies, like I told you about the Stav-built DQ tubes for the DQ500 for this transmission. That goes near the mech. We'll show you guys where that goes. What else? That's it. Let me put an end to this video because I'm tired. Got to work tomorrow, and I don't know whether or not I have to ship out that clutch. Let me shoot over these pictures to Dima and see what he says. Other than that, guys, looking forward to part 2. Should be out Wednesday morning. Catch you guys in the next video.